The following program is intended for mature audiences.
Rudy's Revelation.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode. So today we're going to be talking about how the leftists and why the left in general and even the Democrats want to continue. Today we're going to be talking about. You got to bear with me here. I'm trying something new today. Again, using Rumble Studio, trying to multi-stream. So we're going to get into that and some more headlines here. As I just went on to say, the leftists are continuing to encourage violence across the United States in response to the administration and Border Patrol and ICE carrying out their lawful duties. There's nothing really unlawful about what the administration is doing, and that's the problem, is that people thought that I don't know what's happening here. This is just, there we go. Trying to correct something here. So bear with me here because I'm trying to do something and it's. So Trump is sending in troops, or trying to send in troops, into Portland, Oregon, and Chicago, Illinois. And we're going to get into some violence that occurred there just over the weekend and talk about what that was and why that is a new milestone, I guess you could say, in the Trump administration's fight against the left. And it is a fight for a variety of different reasons. I'm not going to get into that. Yeah, I'm already having technical problems. So bear with me if you're following via the stream. It's locking up already, so I hate to complain about this all the time, but that's just the general nature of what's happening. So I can't really. I thought I had fixed the problem, and now I'm running into the same sort of problems I had before. So just bear with me, and we're just going to get into the headlines now. I'm not going to waste much time today blathering on. I just thought I could be able to get the stream up without problems. Let's just get into the headlines. We're going to start off with the post-millennial. Chicago police ordered to stand down as ICE agents were surrounded by agitators. They were saying that they were being surrounded by a large crowd and that they were requesting police and they were not sending. So ICE got into trouble, and this is what's happening, not just in Portland and Chicago, but other places as well, like in California, where the governors are thumbing their nose at federal agents who are at risk of being injured or assaulted by their constituents, their citizens. So that indeed is a real problem, because if you're not for public safety and you allow your citizens who are not protesting, right? Protesting is standing there with a placard or a sign and shouting whatever, saying whatever, using a megaphone, if you will. But that's protesting. Protesting isn't surrounding federal agents with shields and gas masks, and then sometimes batons or flags or other things they use as weapons, fireworks, tear gas, pepper spray, and in some cases, firearms. That's not protesting. So what's happening here, and what I'm going to lay out here, is the fact that the left is encouraging going beyond lawful protesting and taking it further. And it is usually done with the rhetoric. They claim it's free speech. It might very well be free speech, but when you're inciting violence, that's when you cross the line. The story goes on to say that Chicago police officers were ordered to withdraw from the scene of a violent confrontation involving federal agents on Saturday. After an immigration and customs enforcement operation in the city turned chaotic. So as we know, at least Apple took that Ice Spotter app off their phones because it's unlawful. But this is the problem: is people think fighting the dutifully elected administration of a democratic republic, that fighting the administration and the law enforcement of that administration with violence somehow is justified because those federal agents are within their purview conducting lawful immigration operations. There's nothing unlawful about what they're doing, despite what J.B. Pritzker says. In any case, the article goes on to say, according to CWB Chicago, the incident began around 10:30 a.m. when a woman called 911 reporting that an ICE agent had shot her in the 3900 block of South Kedzie Avenue. Chicago officers initially responded, but federal agents on the scene said the woman was armed and was part of a caravan attempting to obstruct ICE operations. Regardless, both those things are unlawful. Obviously, if you don't know, law enforcement or just the general judicial system considers motor vehicles a weapon. So if you drive your motor vehicle with the intent to injure or kill somebody, that's considered a weapon. Because if you're dragging an ICE officer or federal officer with your car, a car is considered a deadly weapon. You're trying to ram, or in this case, they were trying to block ICE operations. Either or, that's illegal as well. But apparently she had a weapon. How they discovered she had a weapon, did she brandish the weapon? And that's why they shot her. It's hard to determine what happened at that point. One American News has the story as ICE agents shoot armed domestic terrorists in Chicago after being rammed and boxed in by 10 cars. I'll just get into the story. The U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officer shot an armed woman in Chicago after she and others rammed their vehicles into federal agents, boxing them in, according to the Department of Homeland Security officials. Now, don't forget, while this is all happening, the Chicago police refused to intervene. It's really up to municipal police to stop their residents from committing crimes involving ICE operations. That incident took place on Saturday morning near the 40th Street and Kedzie Avenue in Chicago as tensions mount over President Donald Trump's decision to send federal agents into the sanctuary city. There's no such thing as sanctuary city. Just to be clear, there's no sanctuary city law in the Constitution. There's no law that says anywhere that you can prevent federal agents from exercising their duties within your state or city or municipality. There's no law. They just made it up. They just said they make it a state law that says you're not allowed to cooperate with the feds. Not when they're doing something illegal, but when they're carrying out their lawful duties under federal law, which the federal law still stands that if someone is in the country illegally, what happens? They get deported. That's it. You don't get to plead your case or whatever. You're here illegally, you get deported. The armed suspect, identified as U.S. citizen Miramar Martinez, of course, allegedly joined others in attacking ICE agents patrolling roughly 15 miles from an ICE processing center in Broadview, a Chicago suburb. The vehicle the ICE agents were in reportedly blue attire, leading them to be sworn by domestic terrorists who began throwing smoke, gas, rocks, and bottles. Okay, so all of that is illegal. So that's not protesting. You're not standing out there with signs. You're engaging in an attack, the riotous behavior, with regards to the federal agents executing their lawful duties. DHS Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin described the incident on X Post yesterday, proclaiming that our brave law enforcement officers were rammed by vehicles and boxed in by 10 cars, not just a few. Agents were unable to move their vehicles and exited the car. One of the drivers who rammed the law enforcement vehicle was armed with a semi-automatic weapon. Law enforcement was forced to deploy their weapons and fire defensive shots at an armed U.S. citizen who drove herself to the hospital to care for her wounds. But she also called 911, so I don't know. Did she call 911 for an ambulance, or she just called 911 and said, hey, I was shot by ICE officers because I had a weapon? Either or, if the ICE officers were out of their car, or even if they were in their car, and they were being rammed by motor vehicles, or even approached by motor vehicles in a threatening or menacing manner, they still could have shot the driver of the cars to defend themselves. So everybody's like, oh, that's so, I'm not a fan of cops, but they are law enforcement officials that are paid for by my tax dollars because I want the laws to be enforced. If I don't like a law, usually what you do is you deal politically with trying to either repeal that law or change that law or whatever. It's like what happened in Minneapolis with George Floyd. The knee restraint on the neck was a lawful restraint by that police officer. So why he was charged with murder, who the fuck knows? PJ Media, DHS requires special ops backup in Chicago amid domestic terrorism, which we just explained what that is. You can't do that. It's not, like you said, you could use your voice, but here's another thing, is you can't interfere with police law enforcement function. If you try to do that, you're going to be arrested. As a journalist, I was threatened with arrest many times, and some of my fellow journalists were arrested for being told to back up, get away, do whatever, and then not complying. So, I mean, there are ways around it. It's like, they tell you can't stand there, so you go stand somewhere else. And it's kind of like whack-a-mole. Then they come over and go, you can't stand there, and then you go stand somewhere else. Story goes on from PJ Media. Story goes on to say Democrats continue to defy Trump and smear law enforcement with lies. The leftist thugs on the street of Chicago were attacking ICE and Border Patrol. And again, from McLaughlin, these attacks are brave law enforcement. Officers must end. Secretary Noem has taken action to deploy additional resources to restore law and order. We will not allow domestic terrorists to attack our law enforcement. You lay a hand on law enforcement, you will be prosecuted with the fullest extent of the law. And touching law enforcement officers is assault, and that's considered assaulting law enforcement that has a higher penalty than just a minor assault on a regular person. So this is where federal law enforcement needs to get involved and disperse what is a conspiracy of leftists. It's a leftist conspiracy, as I often say. I had too much fun this weekend, so I'm a little out of it this morning. I'm finding it terribly hard to concentrate, and had too much fun yesterday, which was the problem. Too much fun on Saturday night, and it continued to yesterday. So, excuse me. Just the news, Chicago police were told not to help ICE agents under siege, according to reports. An internal directive from Chicago police leadership to withhold assistance to federal agents who were blocked by 10 vehicles, one of which contained an occupant with a firearm. According to dispatch recordings, federal agents contacted the Chicago Police Department for backup while they were under siege. On Sunday, it was reported that local police were ordered by the chief of patrol not to help. We are not sending anybody to that location. There you go. It's a problem. It's this black and white idea that for some reason, because it's Trump, that you don't have to do what the federal government requests. It's a conspiracy. So maybe the Chicago police or the mayor, there's a Democrat, or the Democratic governor has issued statements to the police saying that, hey, you can't help Trump and what Trump's doing. But you also have to understand is that more than half, obviously, of the electorate in the United States voted for this. So they want this. I have no problem with it, because the problem was with the Biden administration, where there was federal law that they just ignored. So that's a law with no enforcement is no law at all. And if it's done by people that are charged with representing you in the political body, that's a dereliction. If you're a lawmaker and then you are calling for your constituents or other people to interfere with law enforcement or ignore laws or what have you, that's a dereliction of duty, and I think you should be removed. But hey, that's the problem with people in America. People are like, whether it's legal or illegal, if it's legal to do, they don't want you to do it. And if it's illegal, they want to do it. And then it's like, well, who cares? It's like, that's the basis of civilized society, a democratic society, is laws. Now, I'm a libertarian. I don't like laws. But there are laws. So I'd like less laws. But then again, it gets into the moral conduct. At a certain point, because it's within your right to do, you have to check your ethics and decide, well, is it considerate of me to do it at this point in time? Everybody's like, I'm going to do it, legal or illegal or whatever. I don't give a shit about you. And that's the problem. Americans not giving a shit about other Americans. Like, if these protesters in the street had any sense, they'd understand that half America voted for this. So, we'll sit there with cameras and we'll document what ICE is doing to these illegal immigrants, and maybe that'll sway the electorate. But to stand out there and physically battle the state, the only way you win against the state is through debate. You're not going to have an armed insurrection or a violent insurrection against an administration. Or the police. It's like people that are criminals or whatever, fighting police or running away from police. You think you're going to win? And I'm not saying that you're not right in whatever it is your beef is, but that's not the way to do it. In a civilized world, in civilization, you get your way through argument, intellectual discourse. New York Post, Trump to send 400 Texas National Guard troops to Illinois as anti-ICE protests continue to rage. So apparently this has been struck down. President Trump is deploying 400 Texas National Guard troops to Illinois, Oregon, and other states as swarms of anti-ICE protesters continue to clash with federal agents. Actually, in Oregon, there's supposed to be California National Guard troops, and then Newsom is suing Trump again, whatever. Pritzker blasted Trump's invasion hours after the president mobilized 300 California National Guard members to Portland. Again, this is struck down. We're going to get to that in just a second. where unrest has raged for over 100 consecutive days. Outside of immigration detention center, the scene has been playing out in Chicago. And these people are fueled by what the leftist politicians really, and leftist media pundits, etc., are saying. And that's the whole problem. Is the quote unquote adults are talking, and then the minions in the street just carry it out. Because they're all in one talking point. They don't have a good intellectual argument, so they're deploying their quote unquote brown shirts. Political thugs, political street thugs. We now must start calling what this is a Trump invasion, Pritzker said. That's not rhetoric. Every American to speak up and help stop this madness. And that's exactly what they're doing. So Pritzker needs to be held in contempt for insurrection because that's exactly what this is. I told you it was a conspiracy. You have the talking heads in media and in the upper echelons of Democratic politics using this vitriolic language. Help stop this madness. So that's what they're doing. With their cars, they're ramming ICE officers to help stop the madness. It's not madness. It's the lawful enforcement of the law. It started with federal agents. It will soon be deploying federalized members of the Illinois National Guard against our wishes because you're attacking federal agents. It's a conspiracy, and it's going to move to a violent conspiracy. You know anything about political history in the United States and other places, you'll know where it all starts with this anarchic idea that we have to stop the capitalists, or we got to stop the Republicans, or we got to stop the... You don't have any right to stop anybody. Sorry. You want to convince people of different, but when you're fresh out of arguments, that's when you resort to violence. Okay, so the AP, this is the breaking news. Federal judge temporarily blocks Trump administration from sending National Guard troops to Oregon. The federal judge late Sunday temporarily blocked the Trump administration from deploying any National Guard units to Oregon at all after a legal whirlwind that began hours earlier when the president mobilized California troops for Portland after the same judge blocked him from using Oregon's National Guard the day before. During a hastily called evening telephone hearing, Judge Karen Immigrant granted a temporary restraining order sought by California and Oregon. Immigrant, who was appointed by President Donald Trump in his first term, seemed incredulous that the president moved to send National Guard troops to Oregon from neighboring California and then from Texas on Sunday, just hours after she ruled for the first time. So I guess he wanted to take Texas Guard troops after that as well. So I earlier reported that that was wrong. Why is all this happening? Because of the street violence against federal agents, which was just proved in Chicago, and it goes on and on. Like I said, you wouldn't need to do this if there were just people showed up with their signs and their bullhorns and saying ICE is evil or whatever. But you can't interfere with law enforcement operations. You can't assault law enforcement, and certainly you can't, I don't know what happened with the gun. We need a better detail that this woman was shot. But even if she was the driver of a vehicle that was attempting to ram ICE agents, that's still assault, and that would have been a legal shooting. But why is this happening? Because shit like this. The Washington Times, man arrested with Molotov cocktail outside D.C. church, marking a new Supreme Court. D.C. police said they arrested and charged a man who had a Molotov cocktail while camping in front of a Northwest church to celebrate its Red Mass, a special service to mark the beginning of the new Supreme Court. Metropolitan Police said they took Louis Jerry, 41, of Vinland, New Jersey. So he wasn't even from Virginia. into custody on charges of unlawful entry, threats to kidnap or injure a person, and possession of a Molotov cocktail. Sunday outside St. Matthew's Cathedral on Rhode Island Avenue in Northwest. Is that right? Oh, it's D.C., so I thought it was Virginia. And there's more. I thought I had the text from that. I thought I read that he had duct tape and all this other accoutrement along with the Molotov cocktail. But that, no, I have a story coming up about the sentencing from the guy who tried to murder Brett Kavanaugh. And I think that's the text. I got it confused. More violence. Fox News. Portland police arrest conservative journalists on another night of chaotic anti-ICE clashes. Conservative journalist Nick Sorter told Fox News he was jumped by Antifa thugs. In all defense, what happened was Nick Sorter was there. He was being surrounded and bumped. You know, Antifa has this thing where they don't I'm not touching you, but you're trying to walk and they get in your way and bump you with their chest. That's still assault. So he tried to get away. He pushed the person out of the way, which is assault. And then he tried to get away and he fell. But the point is that they arrested him and not these other people that are out in the street. It isn't lawful protest. It's not lawful protest, what they're doing. Right? There should be guidelines of what's allowed in protest. Like I said, civil debate, which involves protest, involves chanting with signs, with no effort to impede or obstruct anybody. Because the protest is your message. It's not your action. The problem is with Antifa, they're always into the anarchist, communist, direct action, and they want to hurt somebody, and they're filled up with rhetoric from their own leaders, and then with a wink and a nod from the political leaders in the Democratic Party and liberals on TV. Also associated with this, of course, we have this post-millennial article here. Portland Police Department smears post-millennial journalist who was assaulted by Antifa, suggests she invited violence on herself, and that was the same approach with Nick Sorter. They arrested him because he invited the violence. If you're a conservative and you're present in the midst of this Antifa action, direct action, then it's your fault. Letter from the editor responding to smears from the Portland police. This letter from the editor, but we're just going to get into the text here. The Portland Police Bureau has a problem with effective policing, and the only way they think they can solve it is by lying. The post-millennial staff reporter, Katie Daviscourt, who had been assaulted repeatedly and threatened, was assaulted again on September 30th for reporting on Antifa, which they hate. Look what they did to Andy No. Also reporting on the protest activity outside the ICE facility in Portland, Oregon since June. Yet in their documentation of the violence, Sergeant Andrew Braun claimed that Daviscourt was a counter-protester because she holds a different point of view, but she wasn't there protesting. She was there reporting. Suggested she was responsible for the violence committed against her. Even if you're a counter-protester and you're assaulted, you invited it on yourself. This is defamatory, false, and is unacceptable attack on the professionalism of the post-millennial reporters, which I agree. He goes on to say Daviscourt had been diligently reporting on the protests and riot activity for months. So they obviously knew who she was. And like I said, they targeted Andy No when he was still working for the Quillette. And it goes on. One American News, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, barred from using a bathroom at a municipal building In Illinois, of course. That's what I mean is like they keep doing this. And Secretary Noem says, my team and I were blocked from accessing the Village of Broadview Municipal Building in Illinois. Illegal. You can't bar people from entering a public building unless they've been previously thrown out for a variety of public nuisance. We were stopping for a quick bathroom break. This is a public building. It is. You can't stop people from entering a public building unless they were conducting prohibited activity. And using the bathroom is not a prohibited activity. The village, and that's the thing, they look at what's happening as prohibited activity. It's not prohibited. It's not, these laws by the state aren't even lawful. You can't, it's not a lawful law or ordinance to bar federal law enforcement for conducting operations in your state. It's not, you can't do that. Sanctuary cities is not lawful. The Village of Broadview receives at least $1 million in federal funding. She goes on to say, this is how J.B. Pritzker and his cronies treat our law enforcement. Absolutely shameful. I would agree. More from the Federalist. Biden judge gives would-be Kavanaugh assassin light sentence after left-wing violence skyrockets. And this is my whole point from all of this so far. We have a bunch of political violence out there. The liberals on TV try to say, oh, it's on both sides. It's really not, because where are the conservative protesters causing violence to legitimate government activities and buildings and so forth and so on? Where is it? It isn't. Even under the Biden administration, we weren't surrounding Planned Parenthood buildings and ramming doctors, abortion doctors with cars, or however you want to, metaphorically talk about what would have happened if it were equal. It's not equal. And you never heard conservative politicians talking about, go get them, stop the madness, go out there and stop federal agents. You never heard it. On Friday, U.S. District Judge Deborah Boardman of Maryland handed down a mere 8-year sentence to the man, now insisting he's a woman, who showed up at a conservative Justice Brett Kavanaugh's Maryland home with a Glock 17 pistol, ammunition, lockpicks, duct tape, pepper spray, and other burglary tools, with murder on his mind. California resident who was 26 at the time had hoped to kill 3 of the high court's conservative justices in pursuit of swinging the balance of power to liberals, court documents said. So if Brett Kavanaugh was murdered while Biden was president, he would get to nominate a new justice. He told investigators he was outraged after the leaked draft opinion indicated the majority was about to overturn Roe versus Wade, ending federal protection for abortion. There you go. Because of the rhetoric on the left. It's insane. Everybody wants peace. That's what you don't understand, except for the violent left. I don't care if you have a different opinion. I don't care if you win politically. Maybe I do. But it's fair and square, as long as you don't cheat in the election. That's why we need to go back to paper ballots. You need to have ballots with a chain of custody, verification process, that whole bit. One-day voting. The laws have constantly been changed to make fraud work, because it's very hard to swing an election, especially if you have overwhelming vote for one candidate. They were able in the past, like under Clinton, they were able to pad the vote, maybe tens of thousands of vote, but not hundreds of thousands of vote. You need a special way to do that, and that's what mail-in balloting afforded them. It's the chain of custody more than whether or not you can mail in your ballot or not. It's called chain of custody, which means you could basically take truckloads of ballots, ship them to the counting center, and throw an election. As long as you don't go over the amount of registered voters, which happened early on in the mail-in voting process. Fox News, Blue City crime drives Trump DOJ battle with major Democrat-led county on concealed right carry. DOJ sues over LA CCW delays as Harmeet Dillon says the best offense is a good defense against crime. So there's a lot going on here about the Second Amendment, which is good because everybody, an armed society is a polite society. Everybody should be able to be armed, provided you're not a felon, and provided you don't have mental illness in your background. Because with carrying there's also comes great responsibility. Don't shoot yourself. Don't shoot anybody unintendedly, obviously. And realistically, if you conceal carry, the hope is that you never have to draw your weapon at all. As violent crime surges across America's largest Democrat-run cities, the U.S. Department of Justice is stepping in, this time suing Los Angeles County for illegally blocking citizens from defending themselves. Indeed, the new lawsuit marks the latest clash in a growing battle between the Trump administration and DOJ and Democrat-led cities and states over public safety and constitutional rights. This brings us to our next story from Just the News. Supreme Court takes up challenge to Hawaii concealed carry law. The Hawaii law bans guns in places like beaches, bars, restaurants that serve alcohol, and gas stations. Here's the deal with the Hawaii law, is it's not constitutional. You can't ban people from carrying in public places. That's the whole point. You have the right to bear arms. So really that means open carry. I think open carry is more of a deterrent than concealed carry, but that goes beyond the point. You can't do that. You can only uphold private business owners reserve the right to put up a sign that says no firearms in here. The thing is, what you have to understand is that criminals don't pay attention to gun laws. So if you put a little sign in your window that says no firearms in here, if there's a criminal, he's not going to pay attention to your little sign. Armed society is a polite society. All right, I'm going to revisit this one story here. The Federalist illegal alien who ran Des Moines School District had long history of criminal charges. If you didn't know. So Roberts, who was superintendent of schools at Des Moines, making over $300,000 a year, was an illegal immigrant from Guyana. But Roberts had been in the U.S. for 29 years, and in that time had been convicted of reckless driving and unlawful possession of a loaded firearm. It was also charged in separate incidents with criminal possession of narcotics with intent to sell, criminal possession of forgery instrument, unauthorized use of a vehicle, criminal possession of a firearm, and most recently being illegal alien in possession of a firearm. More? No, but there is more. There is more. New York Post, illegal migrant school chiefs sordid past revealed, sex lies and DEI payouts. So not only was he a criminal, but I reserved my take on the whole thing because I said he might have went through all the training and been a good educator and all these things. Apparently he was a con man. Apparently he did not get all this education and he lied on his applications, and they just liked that he was a foreigner who was a person of color, and so they put him in charge, but he lied. So I don't really know about the sex, but he lied about his education, and obviously lied about his immigration status, and obviously lied about his criminal history. Why they didn't do a background check, or maybe they did and they didn't find that this was that it was enough to bar him from serving in that position. Washington Examiner, the FBI's righteous divorce. Stay with me now. The FBI's righteous divorce from activist propaganda. FBI Director Kash Patel announced this week that the nation's foremost law enforcement agency would no longer work with the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League. This is a welcome step toward ending the abuse of governmental power by left-wing activists to suppress conservative speech. Indeed. James Comey disgraced the FBI by writing love letters to the ADL and embedding agents with the extreme group functioning like a terrorist organization in the disgraceful operation they ran spying on Americans, Kash Patel said. That was not law enforcement. It was activism dressed up as counterterrorism and put Americans in danger. Indeed. And breaking news today is that the FBI is also severing relationship with the Southern Poverty Law Center, the SPLC, which was like the non-Jewish aspect of the ADL. They're almost identical, except they weren't so concerned with anti-Semitism as the ADL is, but all masked for trying to expose hate speech, which really doesn't exist. All right, I want to quickly get into this article by The Atlantic. The other martyr, MAGA has found it's George Floyd. Well, this isn't true, and it was equally expressed by Sasha Stone, who wrote on her Substack, the only thing Charlie Kirk and George Floyd shared was a birthday. No one transformed Charlie Kirk into a hero. He did it all on his own. And she puts forth the argument, as many have done already online since this Atlantic article came out, that Charlie Kirk was an upstanding citizen and a good father, husband, and really smart individual, and gave everybody their due at the podium, at the microphone. He's willing to debate everybody. George Floyd was a career criminal who was violent and likely died of an overdose, I think planted on him, specifically for this whole charade. But George Floyd was no hero. Nor was that other guy that put his hands up, don't shoot. These are criminals, whether their death was warranted in any of these cases, maybe, maybe not. We could argue that, right? But the fact is that George Floyd resisted arrest. He was held with a lawful restraint. Whether you agree with it or not, it was lawful. And wasn't murdered. Likely died of an overdose. So, which caused a summer of rage, which they've been trying to set off for years. I think the majority of the populace has wised up what this is. Some good news, just the news. Homeland Security investigations arrest 41 at Dallas strip club in human trafficking probe. Law enforcement officers arrested 41 illegal foreign nationals, including 29 suspected of illegally working at a Dallas strip club as part of a human trafficking and illegal employment scheme investigation. They did so as the names of 2 victims of a recent ICE Dallas shooting were announced. Both men had extensive criminal histories. They're talking about the 2 guys that were shot. U.S. Homeland Security Investigations Dallas led an investigation into human trafficking and illegal employment at a local Dallas strip club with the support of federal, state, and local enforcement. What we also have to understand here is that illegal immigrants are victimized by employers, by cartels. A lot of times they have to employ themselves in prostitution and other illegal activities because they can't find legal employment. And so they're living sort of in the shadows, ready for exploitation. And that's why children that come over the border are very often exploited in the most heinous way. Also from Just the News, you might have heard about this. Virginia Democrat gubernatorial nominee worked at Saudi school known for Hamas links jihadi grads. Gubernatorial nominee in Virginia worked for the Saudi government-controlled school just after 9/11. Well, so did John Brennan. We're talking about Abigail Spanberger, former Democratic Congresswoman for Virginia, ex-CIA. And the problem is with Just the News in this article, she's CIA. And they don't put this in here. So you want a CIA for governor, CIA? And of course, because it's Virginia. And the CIA wants to make sure Virginia isn't taken over because, they don't want Virginia overseen by conservative, MAGA, populist people. And, the populist wing of the Republican Party, there's no love for the CIA. They know what they're all about. And how the CIA was involved in Islamic radicalism and militancy. I mean, it's just... I'm not going to get too much into this. It's just... If the people in Virginia are going to vote, and I have doubts that the elections there aren't going to be undermined with fraud, specifically by the CIA. Trump calls on Virginia Democrat candidate for AG to exit race after violent text message surfaces. Also in Virginia, here we go. Now, this is Jay Jones. According to an August 22 text messages obtained by the National Review, the candidate Jay Jones wrote the following to Virginia delegate Kerry Coyner. 3 people, 2 bullets. Gilbert, Hitler, and Pol Pot. Gilbert gets 2 bullets in the head. Jones' remarks targeted then House Speaker Todd Gilbert, a Republican, and reportedly included a statement wishing harm to his children. What the fuck? What the fuck? Are you serious? Hitler, who most don't consider a socialist, but his party, the Nazi Party, were socialists. And Pol Pot, a communist of the worst kind. The worst kind, obviously Maoist, right? 2 bullets. But the Republicans gets the 2 bullets. It's like some sort of joke. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Is that the rhetoric coming from the left, the hatred for people on the right who are called fascists and other things, which they're not. And then the No Kings event, which is against Trump and Republicans, which Republicans were against the monarchy. I don't know how that works. But you have even Rob Reiner warns country has 1 year before entering full-on autocracy under Trump. Rob Reiner, director, joined Jane Fonda's committee for the First Amendment to push back against the Trump administration. And if you know anything about the Committee for the First Amendment, it was an old communist thing that was done in the 50s against the Red Scares. We have the right to say things. And I agree, you do have the right to say things. But vitriolic rhetoric that has resulted in political violence you should tone it down. It should be self-policing, obviously. But scaring people against a new Hitler, you're toying around with the mentally ill on the left. And it isn't going to turn out well. We just had this, not less than a month ago, had this assassination of Charlie Kirk, and we still have prominent people like Rob Reiner saying that Hitler is coming. Full-on autocracy. You're not going to have full-on autocracy. Why? Is because we're a democratic republic. We have 3 branches of government. So there's restraint on the executive because of the judicial branch and because of the legislative branch. He's just saying autocracy because the federal government is asserting its power over the states. So you want to side with the South in the Civil War. Is that it? And why it's ridiculous is because stories like these, One America News, Harvard hires drag queen Lahore Vagistan to teach Rue politics. First of all, I don't care about Lahore Vagistan, whatever. Why would, at an esteemed educational institution, why would you have a course, Rue politics? Right? It's more indoctrination, not less. Speaking of indoctrination, New York Post, these Americans died fighting in Ukraine. Now their parents have a message for President Donald Trump. Freedom isn't just for America. Dane Allen Partridge. Now let's just look at this for a second. The Americans fighting for Ukraine. He joined the U.S. Army after high school, serving in Iraq with the 4th Infantry Division as an infantryman, Bradley fighting vehicle driver. Years later, despite marrying and becoming a father, he felt compelled to aid Ukraine. He never left the arms. This guy is sheep-dipped. Obviously. He joined the Army, so he's not a civilian. He has military training. Oh, that's why he went. More than likely, he was working for special ops, got killed, and then they put out this cover story. He was just an American citizen concerned for the freedom for Ukraine. Yeah. It's a slaughter. Why would anyone, even however you felt about it, why will you have children and a wife, and you're not compelled to go because of your sheep-dippedness? Why would you compelled to go into a meat grinder where a whole generation of Ukrainians has been lost? Million young men lost to this meat grinder of a war because the West wants a war of attrition against Russia. Why would you do that if you didn't have any professional connection? You wouldn't. You wouldn't. It's like going in, go fight for Hamas. Yeah, go do that. That's going to work out well. As a ground soldier, you know what I mean? It's not like you go there as a fighter pilot or you're going to operate a missile battery or something. He went there as a combat soldier for the front line. Oh, and he died. Big surprise. So, and the parents say to Trump, oh, he's fighting for, so were 1 million young Ukrainians who were conscripted against their will to do the same. Some foreign news here. One America News, UK police, 2 synagogue attack victims lightly accidentally shot by officers. Yep. We don't even know. Apparently, the so-called terrorist who did or didn't have a bomb and didn't have a gun was shot dead by police, and everybody else was shot by police. So we don't even know if it was a terrorist attack. Apparently, just police shot up the front of a synagogue, killed a supposed attacker, and some local synagogue attendees, Jews, I imagine. Wall Street Journal, I just want to touch on this briefly. LA's entertainment economy is looking like a disaster movie. Work is evaporating, businesses are closing, longtime residents are leaving, and the city's creative middle class is hanging on by a thread. Why? No more secondary acting. Because it's all AI clones now. They don't have need for, what are they called? Stand-in. Secondary actors. Sorry, my mind isn't functioning today. But that's the reason is AI. They don't have need for actors, and it was not understudies. What the hell is the name? Secondary. But that was the middle class around Hollywood was made up of all these, non-listed actors that would, mill around in the background, create crowds and whatever. There was work for these type of actors. And now if you look at some of the, especially some of the Netflix and other movies they make, you could see in the background, it's all fake. They just put them in there. It's all fake animation, CGI, people milling in the background. And I wanted to touch on this as well. Here's how transhumanism is affecting everything. The transhumanist temptation, Grayson Quay unmasked a pernicious ideology that even the most opposed to it are having trouble resisting. Right, it's in our culture. Throughout his book, Quay makes a compelling case that consciously or unconsciously, and that's the problem, I always say this, wittingly or unwittingly, that people ascribe themselves to this narrative that's happening, even if it's against your self-interest. So it doesn't matter if you're a soldier on the left in the streets of Portland, or you're siding with Hamas or whatever, or being transhumanist. Nearly all people today, including professed Christians, have accepted most of the underlying assumptions about transhumanism. In each domain of the modern thought, the human body, reality, politics, work, and God, man has effectively made himself the measure of the master of all things and become less human as a result. And that's postmodern ethic is the reason. I'm sure, I don't know, I didn't read the book, so I don't know if he touches on that, but that's really what it is. The great irony is that philosophers who ushered in contemporary transhumanism labeled themselves humanists. And that's when we shifted from Christian humanism to secular humanism and now to transhumanism. And I talked about this with the transgenderism. It's just issuing in the age of changing yourself, changing your gender. First of all, and then going into if you could change your gender, that's so extreme that certainly you wouldn't mind putting a brain chip in or other bionics or something like that. Brings us into our next headline from the London Times. Does God exist? Modern science shows he must. Bestseller argues. A book by two French authors that challenges a long-standing academic consensus is being published in Britain next week. We've known this in quantum physics, the way quantum physics behaves. Higgs boson, the God particle, all of these things suggest that there is an intelligent being in control. Because the way quantum physics behaves doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to go into the long thing. I just thought I'd bring that up. But now, according to the new book, a great reversal is underway. Science, its authors argues, over 580 pages, has come full circle and forcefully put into the question the existence of a creator back on the table. Indeed, if you look close enough, you might find the contradiction to the way you look at the world. But that's why people don't want to look closely. They don't want to debate. They don't want to hear. They want to shut you out. All you have to do is look at nature and how it is to see miracle every day. More tech news. Leaked meta documents show how AI chatbots handle child exploitation. Internal guidelines show how contractors train chatbots to reject harmful requests involving minors. However, sex chats, that's fine if it's adults. How do they know it's not an adult and a child? Why are they teaching AI chatbots to engage in sexual conversation? It shouldn't be allowed. That's not what AI is for, but what it is being constructed for is to replace humans on every level. More tech news. Zero Hedge, Samsung's smart fridge turns your kitchen into an ad billboard. Samsung's family hub refrigerators are being transformed into digital ad billboard right in your own kitchen with a new software update, according to a new report. Like it or not, owners with these premium models now see ads on their refrigerators. How about that? Refrigerator's front-facing monitor. Yuck. I think I went a little over today, right? Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Appreciate you. So over the past couple months, I haven't been on a regular schedule as far as the podcast is concerned. I'm going to be getting a new laptop, so hopefully I'm going to fix up some of these issues I'm having, but we'll see. But I will be on regular schedule Monday through Friday, live stream 10 a.m. on Rumble. Remember, you're under attack psychologically and biologically. Stay hip to the trick. I appreciate you. See you tomorrow. Respect.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.